The kitchen clock clicked like a metronome for a life I no longer recognized. Tick, tick. Boil rising in a steel kettle, thin steam ribboning past the window where rain stitched silver threads across the evening. I held the envelope flat on the table with my palm, cool paper, warm secret, while my phone face down hummed with messages I wasn't ready to read. I hadn't screamed when the numbers matched. I didn't dance. I just sat in the corner of the convenience store, receipt trembling in my hand, and inhaled. $1 million. After rent notices tucked under the door. After the hospital bill that still smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. After birthdays where I wrapped love because I couldn't afford ribbon. I walked home under a sky that looked like a bruise healing. I decided before the second inhale. No one would know. Not yet. Not my mother, who ranked affection by how quickly you agreed with her. Not my brother, who kept a ledger of favors like a bank account. Not my cousin, who only called when her tank and mine was empty. I needed to see them without the mirage of money. I needed to know what was water and what was heat shimmer. So I designed a simple test. Ask for small help, the kind you only notice when it doesn't arrive. Can someone pick me up from work tonight? My car died. Could you watch Luna for 2 hours? My landlord is doing an inspection. Do you have a spare $60 until Friday? I'm short on groceries. Nothing theatrical. Nothing manipulative. True needs dressed in ordinary clothes. I sent the first message to the family group chat. The blue bubble bobbed, ready to launch, and I hesitated. I saw myself reflected in the phone's black screen. A woman who had learned to hold her breath for too long, who could smile while drowning. I pressed send. The replies came fast, like doors shutting down a hallway. Can't tonight, spinning class. Why didn't you plan ahead? I literally just paid my card off, don't make me go back in debt. Ask someone closer to you. My brother texted a thumbs up emoji with no words attached, as if hope could be acknowledged and then ignored. I turned the envelope over and traced the seal with a fingernail. My kettle clicked off. Somewhere outside, a car alarm wailed and then gave up. The rain steadied, patient as truth. I lifted my phone again, typed a second ask, this time softer, more vulnerable, and watched the typing bubbles bloom and vanish like people deciding if I was worth the inconvenience. When the final response arrived, it wasn't a yes. It was a price list. And the moment I read it, something expensive and breakable inside me went quiet. Came from my cousin Ella. A neatly itemized text, as if she were sending me a catering quote. Pick up from work $35. Gas plus time. Grocery run $20 flat fee. Watching Luna $50/HR. Then, like a cherry on top, she wrote. Family or not, my time's valuable. Hope you understand. Sis. I stared at the glowing screen until the words bled together. Somewhere between outrage and grief, I realized my chest wasn't rising evenly. I placed the phone down, palms flat on the table, and listened to the house. Its hums, its sighs, its lack of footsteps coming toward me. I had expected at least one person to show up without weighing the cost. I thought maybe my brother, Daniel. After all, I once sold my grandmother's bracelet to keep his lights on during a winter storm. I thought maybe my mother, who, in quieter moments, still reminded me I was the dependable one. But dependability, it seemed, was a one-way street. I walked to the kitchen drawer where the envelope waited. Pulled it out. Ran my fingers over the faint embossed lettering from the State Lottery Commission. $1 million. Untouched. My name inked in confident blue on the check. The paper felt heavier now, as if aware of the silence it had bought me. That night I made 3 more requests. One to Daniel, *car won't start. Could you drive me to work tomorrow? Sis. His reply, *gas prices are insane right now. Ask Ella, she owes you anyway. Sis. One to my mother, feeling sick. Could you bring Luna dinner? She's just had cereal. Sis. Her reply, I've had a long day. She can skip a meal and be fine. Sis. And one to my aunt, who'd held me while I cried when my father left. Could you keep me company for a bit? Just feeling low. Sis. Her reply, I'm booked all week. Self-care is important. Don't drain yourself by leaning on others. Sis. I laughed, a sharp sound that startled even me. I wasn't leaning. I was dangling over the edge, holding a rope they could have easily pulled. The next morning I took Luna to school, bought her the largest hot chocolate on the menu, and kissed her forehead longer than usual. Be kind, I told her. She asked why, eyes wide. Because most people aren't when it's free. I went home, sat on my bed with the envelope in my lap and decided something. They had shown me their price list. I would show them mine. Only mine wouldn't be in dollars. The bank lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and winter coats damp from drizzle. I walked past the velvet rope, the envelope tucked in my coat pocket, its weight pressing against my hip like a reminder that power could be silent. The teller smiled automatically. Good morning. What can I do for you today? I slid the check across the counter without a word. Her eyes flicked to the numbers, then back to me. Something in her expression softened. Congratulations, she whispered, as if saying it too loudly might summon hands to snatch it away. I'd like it deposited into my personal account, I said, my voice steady low. She nodded. No questions, no fuss, just the quiet efficiency of someone who knew value when she saw it. The printer hummed, receipts sliding out like small white truths. I folded mine carefully, tucking it deep in my wallet. As I walked out, the drizzle had turned to a fine mist, the kind that clings to your skin without soaking you. I thought of each text, each refusal, each moment they'd measured their help against the inconvenience to themselves. I realized they had been making silent withdrawals from me for years. Time, money, emotional labor. And I'd been the kind of bank that never charged fees. Not anymore. I stopped at a small cafe on the corner and ordered tea, watching steam curl from the cup like it had secrets to tell. I opened my notebook, an old habit from before life had become about survival, and began to list names. Not in anger but in precision. Daniel. Mother. Oh. Aunt Marcy. Two friends who had once sworn ride or die, but vanished when my ride broke down. Next to each name I wrote the last thing I had done for them. The job referrals. The rent money. The babysitting. The listening at 3 a.m. And beside those, I wrote nothing for what they'd given me back. By the time my tea had cooled, I knew what I would do. I wouldn't scream or confront or demand apologies. They'd already told me who they were. I would simply close their accounts. Every shared subscription, every temporary loan, every spare key they held, I would take it all back. Quietly. Completely. And then I would let them feel the cost of losing something they thought would always be free. It began with keys. A slow sweep of my house, opening drawers and cabinets, finding those little brass tokens of trust I'd handed out over the years. Daniel's spare house key, tucked in an envelope marked urgent mail only. My mother's copy, still on the same floral keychain I'd given her one Christmas when I couldn't afford more. Ella's, hidden in the pocket of an old denim jacket she'd forgotten here months ago. I slid them into a velvet pouch, one by one, the sound of metal on metal ringing faintly in the quiet. Not anger, just accounting. Next were the accounts themselves. Netflix. Password changed. Shared grocery delivery. That Amazon Prime membership Daniel borrowed for years. Gone. With each click I felt lighter. Not because I was punishing them, but because I was finally stopping the quiet bleed of myself into people who only turned up with open hands. By midday I moved to the more personal withdrawals. The emergency fund, savings account my mother had access to. I transferred every cent to a new private account. The joint phone plan Ella insisted on joining so she could save money. I canceled her line. She texted within minutes. Asterisk, hey? My phone's not working? Asterisk, I didn't reply. The most symbolic was the garage. Daniel had been storing his vintage motorcycle there for years, promising he'd pick it up next week. That week never came. I called a towing company. When the driver asked if I was sure, I just nodded. Absolutely. By the time evening fell, my house felt different. The air seemed clearer, as if all those invisible threads tying me to their demands had been cut. Luna came home from school, dropped her backpack and asked why I was smiling. Just making room, I told her. That night, lying in bed, I realized something. They wouldn't notice at first. Not the keys, not the passwords, not the absence of my yes to every ask. But eventually the calls would come. The texts. The questions. And when they did, I'd be ready with the simplest answer I'd ever given. You showed me my value to you. Well, I'm returning the favor. It didn't take long. 3 days after I closed the last account, my phone lit up with Daniel's name. I let it ring until voicemail caught it, then listened as his voice filled the room. tight-clipped, already annoyed. Hey, Netflix is asking me to log in again? And my Amazon order isn't going through. Did something happen? Sis. I could hear the unspoken line beneath his words. Fix this. For me. I didn't call back. That evening, Ella's text came through. So, did you cancel my phone? That's seriously not cool. I had to use Wi-Fi at work all day. She added a frowning emoji as if that could soften her entitlement. So I said nothing. The silence was strategic, not petty. I wasn't going to waste my breath explaining a lesson they weren't ready to learn. Instead, I went about my days. Morning tea, walks with Luna, sketching in my notebook, the quiet luxury of knowing my bills were covered without anyone's help. On the fourth day, my mother called. Her voice was syrupy at first, but it cracked quickly. I couldn't get into the savings account. Is there an issue with the bank? And where's my house key? I was going to drop off some old curtains for you. Sis. I almost laughed. Curtains. She hadn't brought dinner when Luna was hungry, but now, curtains. I told her calmly, everything's fine with the bank. I just made some changes. She didn't like that answer. I could hear her inhale, ready to deliver one of her rehearsed monologues about loyalty and family obligations, but I ended the call before she could start. By the weekend they'd all noticed. The group chat lit up like a Christmas tree, half accusations, half passive-aggressive jokes. Guess some people forget where they came from. Family's supposed to share. Hope you're enjoying your little independence. I muted the thread. That Sunday I drove to the coast with Luna. We sat on a weathered pier watching the gulls wheel over the water. I let the salt air tangle my hair and thought about how peace has a flavor when you've starved for it long enough. When my phone finally buzzed again, it wasn't any of them. It was someone I hadn't expected. Someone who had failed my test in the worst way. And they weren't calling to apologize. They were calling because they needed me. It was Aunt Marcy. The same woman who, just a week earlier, had told me she was booked all week when I asked for company on a bad night. Her voice was rushed, frantic. I know it's last minute, but my water heater just broke. The plumber says it's going to cost at least $800 and I don't get paid until next Friday. Could you, just this once, spot me the money? Sis. Just this once. As if the hundreds I'd quietly given her over the years didn't count because they hadn't been branded with conditions. I let her talk. She explained how miserable it was to shower at the gym, how her landlord wasn't lifting a finger, how no one else she'd called had answered. I could picture her, pacing the kitchen in that robe she always swore she'd replace, her hair twisted up in a pen. When she finally paused to breathe, I said, Marcy, I can't help you with that. The silence that followed was sharp, like glass breaking in slow motion. Can't, or won't? She asked. Both, I said simply. She scoffed, her tone curdling into something bitter. Well, after everything I've done for you, sis. I almost asked her to list those things. I almost reminded her of the countless late-night rides, the money, the favors, the way I'd made her problems mine. But I didn't. That wasn't the point anymore. Hope you get it sorted, I said and hung up. That night the group chat went from simmer to boil. Ella accusing me of turning my back on family. Daniel chiming in about how money changes people. My mother adding the final blow. We're done asking you for anything. You're on your own now. Sis. I stared at those words, feeling nothing but clarity. They thought this was punishment. They thought I'd read that line and panic, scrambling to win back their approval. Instead, I screenshotted it, saved it to my phone, and labeled the file Freedom. But I wasn't finished. No, this was just the surface. I'd been holding the real win in my back pocket, waiting for the right moment to play it. And that moment was about to arrive. The moment came wrapped in celebration. Daniel's birthday. A dinner reservation at the nicest steakhouse in the city. One they could never afford on their own. I knew because Ella accidentally sent the group chat the menu with prices circled and "Look at this insane" scribbled underneath. They didn't invite me. Of course not. But I knew they'd post about it, tag the location, the wine, the dessert plate scrawled with "Happy Birthday" in chocolate. And I knew exactly how to turn that night into the mirror they'd been avoiding. That afternoon I called the restaurant. Spoke to the manager. Paid for the entire table. 6 people, full prix fixe menu, wine pairings, the works. And then I added one condition. At the end of the night, bring them the bill with this note on top, I said, sliding my credit card number across the phone line. The note was simple. Asterisk, covered in full by the person you decided wasn't worth helping. Sis. I wasn't there to see their faces when it happened. But I didn't need to be. My phone lit up not with thanks but with confusion. Daniel texted. Asterisk, why would you do that? Asterisk, my mother wrote. Asterisk, if you can afford that, why not help us when we actually need it? Sis. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat on my couch with Luna asleep against my side, the city lights spilling gold through the curtains, and imagined the moment they realized two things at once. That I had the means to help, and that I had chosen not to. Not out of cruelty. Not out of revenge in the way they'd frame it later. But because they had already set the price on what my presence was worth to them. I had simply paid it, in full and permanently. The silence after that night stretched for days. No calls. No group chat messages. No surprise visits. I thought that might be the end of it. But a week later I got one last message. Short, sharp, the final echo of their outrage before the quiet became permanent. It said only, asterisk, don't expect us to be there for you when you need it. Sis. And I smiled, because that was exactly the point. I read their message once, then again until the words lost shape. Don't expect us to be there for you when you need it. The irony tasted sweet. They thought they were delivering a punishment, a warning that I'd one day regret. But all I felt was relief. Pure, unshakable relief. I set my phone down and walked into the kitchen. The evening sun spilled across the counter in gold sheets, catching on the rim of the mug in my hand. Luna was at the table coloring, humming to herself. The air was quiet in that way you don't notice until you've lived in noise for too long. For the first time I realized the test had never been about the money. It had been about the truth. About peeling back the polite smiles and love you texts to see the bare bones of what we really were to each other. And the truth was, they'd been gone long before I stopped answering. That night I opened my laptop and began to plan. Not for them, for me and for Luna. I booked a trip we'd dreamed of for years, the kind I'd always said was too much for our budget. I set aside a trust fund in her name, quietly ensuring she'd never have to beg for help from people who saw generosity as a transaction. I even made a donation to the community center that once let me pay with volunteer hours when I couldn't afford Luna's art classes. Every dollar felt like a thread woven into something solid, something mine. Weeks passed. The group chat stayed silent. The keys never came knocking at my door. The mailbox was empty of their requests, their crises, their endless overdrafts on my time. And yet, my life had never been more full. On a Sunday morning I sat on the balcony, coffee warm in my palms, and watched Luna chase bubbles across the yard. The wind caught her laughter and carried it toward me, and I thought about how quiet can be the loudest answer you ever give. They had shown me their balance sheet. I had closed the account,